everybody, Plushie here, and in today's hot take video, we're going to take a look at the newest SSR Berserker, Lilith. Berserker is still by far the most powerful class in the game because of their wide coverage, their hidden 1.1 times damage multiplier, and their generally high attack stat. This makes every SSR Berserker release pretty exciting because they're usually going to be really good. Just take a look at the two most recent examples with Lohi and Summer Castoria, and you would know that Lilith has a lot to live up to. And in today's video, of course, we'll try to find out whether she does or not. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into today's hot take video on Lilith. Taking a look at her base stats, she has really good attack stat. In fact, the 9th highest in the entire game. So even though she's not the highest attacking Berserker, this is still way more than serviceable. What isn't that great, however, are her base gains. She has a base gain of 0.4% per hit on 5 hit quick cards and 4 hit arts cards. Now, on the surface, this doesn't look that bad, and I will concede this isn't like super abysmal, but a lot of the top tier quick DPSs have quick cards that are closer to a 3%, and usually a 1.6% arts card isn't considered bad, but when you combo that with a only 2.0% quick card, her general gains aren't actually gonna feel that great. And also, I don't like the deck. The deck only has 1 buster card and has 2 arts and 2 quick. In general, for quick DPSs, you either want to go full on quick and have 3 quick cards, or you want to spec into Buster because of Summer Scotty and have 2 Buster cards. She has a lot of very good and relevant traits though. She is Chaotic Evil, which combos with Dolman. She is Animal Characteristics, which combos with Koyan Dark in farming. She's also Divine, which can combo with certain units like Stheno, who is going to be actually kind of relevant. And she is a demon. She's the first ever servant that has the demon trait. Again, it's different from demonic. It's actually a very rare trait that used to only exist in trash mobs, but now you have at least 1 servant that has that. It is completely irrelevant for her gameplay, but I just want to bring that up. Taking a look at her first skill, it is a 150% chance to charm 1 target. It would also reduce that target's critical damage resistance by 50% for 3 turns, and it is also a 30 star bomb. All of this is on a 6-turn cooldown. The charm is actually very important because she has anti-charm on her MP, so it's gonna be a very big part of her MP damage. And this being a 150% chance to land is super good because even when you take a look at servants with really nasty passive combos like Summer Scotty, who has both magic resistance and goddess essence, she still does not exceed 50% passive debuff resistance. So unless you straight up have charm immune or mental debuff immune, this is going to land in farming. I guess one extra exception is King Hassan, who has 100% anti-charm resistance as his passive, but this means that Lilith actually still has a 50% chance to land her charm instead of just not being able to like most other servants. The 50% crit resist down is actually just a debuff version of a crit up. It does not work the same as Khazro Drop's first skill, where it also boosts your MP gain and star gen. In general, I think this is worse than a straight up crit up for 3 turns because I don't think Lilith cares about helping her other teammates crit harder on the enemy. One extra tidbit about this is that this can technically go over the crit cap. So if Lilith already has 500% crit buff on her, this would still benefit her crit damage. The 30 star bomb is really good. It helps her immediately pop off with crit damage. So even when it combos with Summer Scotty's puny 15 star bomb, it's still basically a guaranteed crit immediately on turn 1. Her second skill is a 30% quick and arts double buff for 3 turns and a 2x 3-turn evade on a 6-turn cooldown. This is not the most exciting skill to say the least, but it is still very effective for Lilith. The 30% quick and arts buff buffs the majority of her attacking cards, including her MP, and also helps with her MP generation, which we just saw she might have a little bit of trouble when taking a look at her base stats. The 2x 3-turn evade is especially good on Berserkers because unlike in most other classes where you're trying to tank like a very heavy attack from the enemy, because they take double damage innately, just blocking 2 normal hits can be the difference between life and death. So she's gonna have a lot better survivability compared to a servant that completely has no form of hard survival, such as MHXA or Kintoki. And finally, her third skill is a 3-turn Invul Pierce, as well as a 3-turn 30% attack up, and a 50 MP battery. It also has the merit of reducing her own mental debuff resistance by 30% for 3 turns, and this skill is on a 6-turn cooldown. This is a very good skill. 3-turn Invul Pierce on a skill, in my opinion, is the highest form of Invul Pierce, even better than ones that are tied to your MP, because this allows you to still do damage even without using your MP through invincibility. The 30% attack up is a really nice steroid. It of course buffs every form of attack that she can do, but also it is a completely different category of buff type compared to her skill 1 and skill 2. Her skill 1 is a crit up, her skill 2 is a color buff, and her skill 3 is an attack up. So she has a really good spread of different types of attack buffs as well. And finally, 50 MP battery is always going to be good. It's good for farming, it's good for boss fights, it's good for just everything. There's no complaints there. You can basically ignore the demerit. In most cases, it doesn't really do anything. She has Madness Enhancement EX, which is really good for a Berserker, but she only has 1 Buster card, so it's actually not as good. Divinity B literally does nothing, only there for the Divine trait, and she also has a passive 10% anti-living human power mod, which is a nice little bonus. I don't think it's particularly relevant, but you know, it's there as just a little boost against certain targets. And finally, her MP is a single target 9-hit quick MP that gives her a 1-turn 30% anti-lawful power mod and a 1-turn 30% anti-good power mod. They're separate, by the way, before the MP does damage. And it also inflicts a 1000 damage 3-turn curse and poison on the enemy after damage, as well as reduce their defense by 20% for 3 turns after damage. And finally, it also applies the chaotic and evil alignment on a target for 3 turns. The overcharge of the MP is an anti-charm in the form of a super effective that scales all the way from 150% to 200%. So the MP is the real juice here, in my opinion. Anti-lawful and anti-good are both really decent power mods, especially considering how often they overlap, which would give her 60% anti-trait power mod. Just like any other power mod effect, this also buffs her face card on the same term she MPs, so it's gonna be really good in boss fights against lawful and good targets. Maybe this could have been 50% considering Castoria has anti-divine and anti-chaotic, and both are 50%, but maybe they toned it down because she has a universal anti-trait in anti-charm. The poison and the curse does not matter in any way, but the defense down after damage is quite nice. It obviously doesn't help her in farming, but it does give her ramp up damage, which she kind of wants because she only gets the anti-charm damage every 6 turns in a boss fight, so she probably wants some other form of damage increase that does not tie to her skill cooldown. Applying chaotic and evil basically has 0 synergy with her kit and is meant to be paired with other servants with anti-chaotic or anti-evil, which of course we don't have a shortage of, but in reality I don't think this is gonna be all that useful because in a boss fight Lilith is generally going to be your main DPS, so you don't really want to sort of steal her spotlight with another DPS. Other than maybe Tonalico, just because of how strong she is as a support, I don't really see that combo working out very well. In terms of farming, you can technically combo this with another anti-trait servant because it's very often in 90++ where you have a single target deal damage to the biggest HP one on the field and an AoE to take out the rest, right? So you can, for example, use this MP and then use Arcoade's MP to kill something with a lot of damage. However, again, because her overcharge is anti-charm, I feel like in a lot of cases you actually would prefer to chain her MP after the AoE. Obviously depends on how built your AoE is. If you have like a hyper grailed Tonalico or Arcoade, then applying this anti-trait is definitely worth it. So I guess it has some merit in farming. The best way to take advantage of this trait application for Lilith herself, in my opinion, is actually using command codes, because there are so many command codes in this game that are either anti-chaotic, anti-evil, or both, like this Beniemma command code that gives you 15% anti-chaotic and anti-evil power mods separately. There are of course also the Karen anti-chaotic by 25% power mod, and crit boost command codes that only deal extra damage against evil when critting. And finally, of course, the most broken effect of this MP is the anti-charm that also scales with overcharge, which is quite ridiculous. You can boost this to a very high degree. It's a very scary effect. Combo with her first skill that is basically guaranteed to land, especially in farming, her MP just hits extremely hard. In terms of farming, Lilith is going to be extremely straightforward. She has basically no ability to loop. She refunds like 10 MP with triple Scotty, so forget about it. To be fair, most single target quicks can't loop anyways. She also doesn't have any form of party support, no charge, no buffs, nothing. So her advantage in multi-core is just her ridiculous single target damage, very similar to Kintoki. They even both have a one-turn burst skill where Kintoki has the 50% attack up and Lilith has the charm, which of course would trigger her MP's anti-trade. I'm mainly going to use this damage sheet for damage comparison, where they only consider a servant's self buffs, because number one, it's very difficult to come up with a hypothetical situation for multi-core. The team build is way too diverse for that. And number two, just like Kintoki, Lilith usually does not rely heavily on external buffs in order to do enough damage. She just has enough as is. So I think it's more fair to evaluate them just raw instead of considering certain scenarios. So taking a look at the single target Berserker damage list, Lilith's damage is ridiculous, because look at how much more damage she's doing compared to Kintoki here. As a reminder, Kintoki used to be the ceiling of single target traitless damage, and Lilith just casually outdamages him by this much. Even at MP1, where Kintoki is supposed to have the most advantage because he has an upgraded MP, and MP upgrades scale better at lower MP levels, Lilith is still doing 1.33 times his damage. And at MP5, she's doing a whopping 1.48 times his damage. Lilith's damage is so good that even when we remove her charm, she's still doing very serviceable damage. Now obviously at MP1, now that she does not have the charm, she's not going to beat Kintoki, but she's still doing 88% Kintoki's damage, which is pretty nice. It's about the same amount of damage that Arjuna Alter does at MP1, who is yet another single target Berserker with an upgraded MP. And as the MP level creeps up, she catches up to Kintoki. And at MP5, she's basically doing the same amount of damage that Kintoki's doing at MP5, even without her charm. Which makes sense because with the charm, it's about a 1.5 times damage difference, and without the charm, she's losing that anti-trait, so she's losing 1.5 times damage. This means that even if you're using her MP multiple times in a run, even on the non-charm turn, it's still gonna do really good damage. Having this much damage means that Lilith is beating most single targets in the game, even when they're hitting counterclass. So for example, if you take a look at Jolter's damage here, and you double it, assuming she's hitting a Berserker, she does outdamage Lilith, but only by a little bit. And obviously Jolter is one of the highest damaging single target units in the entire game if we don't consider class advantage. So if you go down the list, every other servant is going to do basically less damage than Lilith. And that is very scary because unless you're hitting a specific anti-trait that is really strong, or if you're a servant that has any form of party-wide support like Phantasmoon or Summer Castoria, not even counterclassing can allow you to outcompete Lilith in terms of one-turn burst damage in multi-core farming. All of that is still not even taking into consideration that Lilith has additional anti-traits on top of her anti-charm. She has 30% anti-lawful and 30% anti-good. Even if she just hits one of the lawful or good on top of the anti-charm, her damage is already through the roof, and if she happens to hit both lawful and good at the same time, which mind you isn't actually that rare, you know, lawful good are usually overlapping alignments, kind of like chaotic and evil, then the only way to beat her her in damage is to have very unlikely circumstances, such as Summer Castoria hitting Chaotic, Divine, and Threat to Humanity all at once, or non-Berserker servants who already has strong anti-traits to also hit full counter class. Lilith, being both Chaotic Evil and Animal characteristics, also allows her to pair with Dolman and Koyan Dark in multi-core farming. Dolman, in my opinion, is definitely the less relevant one because he doesn't have any party charge, so he generally is not considered a very good multi-core farmer. His damage is also lackluster unless there are insta-killable waves. Koyan Dark is definitely the more relevant one in my opinion because Animal characteristics allows her to buff Lilith with 30% attack up, even though Koyan Dark only buffs Buster with her AoE battery. More importantly, Koyan Dark also has a targetable 2-stage overcharge boost that can help Lilith scale her anti-charm damage. So on the surface, Koyan Dark might look like a Buster exclusive multi-core farmer, and she might benefit Kintoki more, but in reality, because of that overcharge boost and the animal characteristic, she helps Lilith deal even more damage than Kintoki when paired together, as you can see here with this simple damage comparison. Kintoki does have one edge over Lilith, which is Oberon. And Kintoki, when paired with Oberon and nothing else, does in fact outdamage Lilith at every MP level. I know I did send a community post showing App Media's calculation where Lilith does beat Kintoki at higher MP levels, but that is actually assuming you have max Berserker class score, which I was not aware of at the time, and I do not want to assume everybody is going to have a max out Berserker class score. And even if you don't, honestly, at MP1, Kintoki does beat Lilith pretty confidently, but at MP5, they're basically doing the same damage anyway. So again, the gap would decrease as your MP levels increase in terms of the two servants. The final comparison that people might be interested in is, of course, should I pull for Castoria Summer or Lilith if I only care about farming? Well, this is a very difficult question to answer simply because of how different people are using these two servants in multicore. Lilith, again, as I mentioned earlier, is more of a no string attached type of single target, kind of like her outfit, where she just is thrown into any team to do one big MP damage. If you use Castoria Summer the same way, you'll find yourself very disappointed at her damage unless she's hitting multiple of her anti-traits, because as you can see here in this damage sheet, she literally does half as much damage as Lilith does. But Castoria does not excel in terms of singular MP burst damage. Instead, she excels in spamming her MP as well as supporting her party with her targetable 20% MP battery, party-wide MP game boost, and most importantly, Overcharge +2, which combos perfectly with Tonalico. So again, I can't really give you a definitive answer. The only tip I can tell you in terms of these two characters comparison is that if you're going for just a lower MP level copy, MP2 or even MP1, I think you might struggle in 90++s sometimes with Summer Castoria, especially when she's not hitting anti-traits, while Lilith can probably handle one wave damage pretty easily, even at lower MP levels. As you can see here, her one-turn burst damage at MP1 is only slightly lower than Kintoki's at MP3, and beating Castoria's at MP5, so Lilith, even though she lacks the supportability and the spammability compared to Castoria, she also does not need nearly as much investment in order to feel comfortable with the 90++ HP. In terms of challenge quests, Lilith is a wonderful DPS because all of that great damage I just spent a bunch of time talking about in her farming also applies in non-farming content, of course. Now, her anti-charm MP is not going to be able to trigger very often under normal circumstances because her first skill, which is her charm skill, has a 6-turn cooldown. It is very consistent though because of it being a 150% chance to land, so at least you don't have to deal with very annoying RNG in most cases. you can try to trigger it more than once within 6 turns by pairing her with other supports that has the ability to charm. I think Stheno in particular is a wonderful support for Lilith, because Stheno's second skill after her most recent buff is now not male exclusive. It can charm any target, and that of course gives Lilith another turn of anti-charm MP. She also buffs Divine with her third skill, and Lilith is of course a Divine Servant. And especially if you're fighting against a male boss, Stheno can charm even more on top of her second skill with spamming her MP. So Lilith can do even more anti-charm MP turns. But if you don't want to include Stheno on your team and you just want to use a standard quick team, you're completely fine as well, because as I've shown earlier, Lilith's damage, even without the charm, is still some of the highest in the entire game. In a boss fight in particular, it's also helped by her MP being able to cast a 3-turn defense down after damage, meaning that she actually has ramp up MP damage as long as she's hitting the same target over and over again. And finally, the anti-lawful and good power mods of course also help a lot if she is fighting against either of these traits or both of these traits. Lilith also just has all the essentials of a main DPS. She has a big battery and a star bomb, allowing her to immediately pop off with both crits and MP damage. She also has a great mix of steroids, with her first skill being a crit up, her second skill being a color buff, and her third skill being an attack up. She even has a 3-turn Invul Pierce on her third skill, which in my opinion is the highest form of Invul Pierce, not needing to even MP in order to bypass enemies' hard defense. She also has actually pretty decent survival as a quick berserker, because she not just has that 2x 3-turn evade, she also has a charm on her first skill. Remember, the charm isn't just a tool to boost her MP damage, it also just stops the enemy from moving for a single turn. Again, its high chance of landing at 150% chance makes it an even more consistent survival tool than usual. If you want to further improve her survivability, you can of course include Castoria in your team. Lilith even has 2 arts cards for her to buff, and Lilith has pretty poor MP gains on her cards, so Castoria's skill 3 can help with her arts cards, and her skill 2 can help with all of her cards. Rhaenys can serve a similar role, as Rhaenys' MP can also buff the entire party's MP generation. She also removes her class disadvantage defensively, effectively doubling Lilith's HP. And finally, she also has the powerful attack up, as well as the 3-time invul that is targetable that you're gonna usually use on Lilith. It even stacks with her evade, and she also has debuff resistant up that can kind of counteract her third skill's demerit when it is relevant. So Rhaenys is also a nice support for her. And finally, Mash Paladin is my third recommendation in terms of a support that can make Lilith survive a lot better, because Mash has that insane passive that reduces all incoming damage to her allies to 1000 for 5 attacks. She of course also has party-wide invul essentially on a 3-turn cooldown, and the ability to give the entire party damage cut and defense up. She can even redirect damage to herself so Lilith doesn't take that many hits. So even though she might hate it, Mash is gonna be a great protector to Lilith. I did find a couple of issues I have with Lilith in terms of using her as a boss killing DPS, one of which being her heavy reliance on debuffs for damage. It's not just the charm, but also her crit resist down and the defense down on her MP. They're all debuff effects. So against enemies with debuff immunity, she's obviously gonna lose a lot of damage. I actually think the charm is the least of the problems, because yes, enemies can pretty often have mental debuff immunity or just charm immunity, but her damage is already good even without the charm. The charm is also the most consistent debuff out of the 3 because it has a 150% chance to land instead of the base 100%. So against enemies with high debuff resistance passives, that is actually the most consistent one. Another problem I have with Lilith is her crits aren't as consistent as I'd like them to be. It sounds a little bit baffling because she's a quick DPS with 5-hit quick cards and a 9-hit MP, but she is a berserker with no form of star absorb up. And quick supports don't really give you any good star absorb ups either. Characters like Kozodrop and Caster Scotty straight up just doesn't give you any star absorption, and even Summer Scotty only gives you a 1-turn star absorb up, and it's only for Buster cards, of which she only has 1. So overall, she might make like 30 stars every turn, but she's still not gonna be guaranteed to crit with her entire Brave Chain, which, I mean, it sounds like a lot to ask, but for many other servants, it's not really that big of an issue. If you look at characters like Summer Castoria, whose arts and supposed to be not good at crits, she has a 5,000% star absorb up for 3 turns. So a lot of times she ends up having more consistent crits than Lilith. Usually the way you remedy this for a low star weight character in Quick is just to run double Summer Scotty, because double Summer Scotty would generate 30 stars passively at the end of each turn for 3 turns, right? But Lilith doesn't pair that well with Summer Scotty, again because of her subpar deck with only 1 Buster card. You would much rather use Kozodrop as well as normal Scotty for damage and for gains. And finally, perhaps my biggest issue with Lilith are her poor MP gains on her face cards. As a reminder, she has 2 2% quick cards and 2 1.6% arts cards. These numbers might not mean much to you, but if we comb through all of these single target SSR quick servants, this is bottom of the barrel MP generation. Just to give you an idea, if we take just a couple of common single target quicks and pair them with double Summer Scotty and look at how much MP they generate with an MP-QQ Brave Chain with both quicks critting, usually they get like 70 to 80%, right? If you take a look at here, Comma gets 78%, MHXA gets almost 90, and certain servants can get to 100, such as Saber Medusa. But Lilith gets a whopping 46%. This is significantly lower than most common single target quick units. This is actually a pretty big issue because most quick single target boss killers are really good at spamming their MP, but Lilith is a very battery hungry servant. You would need to bring other chargers in order to help her spam her MP. This is also why I'm so bugged by her slightly inconsistent crits, because she absolutely needs to crit all of her cards in order to maximize her MP gains. To mitigate this issue, I highly recommend bringing her with Kozodrop. You can also, of course, use characters like Castoria to help with her gains as well. In conclusion, Lilith is a very straightforward servant that just does ridiculous damage. As a farmer, she usurped Kintoki as the newest traitless single target DPS by a pretty large margin as well. I already went extensively into her damage and farming, so if you're really curious, just scroll back to that section. As a challenge quest DPS, she has all the essential skills: a big star bomb, a big battery, a great mix of steroids, a hard survival skill, and even a really strong Invo Pierce on a 3-turn duration skill. I basically have no issues with her challenge quest performance other than her poor card gains. That is a pretty big negative in my opinion, but still, if you are keen on adopting a more hyper-offensive playstyle, then Lilith can be a more attractive DPS than Summer Castoria, even though generally you would much prefer Summer Castoria for the sake of safety. Her extremely high damage also makes her usable even at MP1, which unfortunately cannot be said for a lot of other DPSs in this game. So even if you just want to pull her for aesthetic reasons, you might actually end up using her quite a bit. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed the video. This has been a while. I hope this is not nearly as long as the MASH hot take, but I haven't started editing, so I don't know how long this is gonna be. I don't know if I'm gonna make the Jean hot take anymore because her banner already ended. I apologize. There are just too much going on in my life, and also 3 SSRs in this period is a bit much. At the very least, I'll make it when the banner approaches NA, but if we end up not getting a lot of content for video making, I might make her hot take still. So yeah, see you guys in the next one, and again, hope you guys enjoy.